All right. We are streaming now. And we've got Jared here for talking about 9/11. Got a couple of videos queued up. He's got some facts I've got pulled up on the screen. He's got 2 page of facts. Um, so that's what I've got pulled up on the screen right now for you. And let's see, make sure that that's all good. So, do you want? How do you want to start? What do you want to talk about?
I wanted to talk about Operation Northwoods and get into
Okay.
some of that and lay that as kind of a precedent for this conversation. But before we jump into Northwoods, I just wanted to say a lot of this data that I've used and shared on my end was put together by a gentleman by the name of Peace Dozer. Not Killdozer, Peace Dozer. He's got a great channel on YouTube, and I use this as the foundation for what I put together to get today on my end. And visit his stuff. He's got great memes. He puts out every Friday. He's a good dude. And yeah, Peace Dozer. He has peacedozer.com. And with that said, let's jump into Operation Northwoods.
Oh, by the way, I just meant to tell you that, yeah, I was actually talking to Peace Dozer privately. He said he doesn't like you.
Oh shit, that hurts my butthole.
I'm just kidding.
All right.
All right. So, you want to talk about Operation Northwoods? I'll let you start the conversation. I know a little bit about it.
Well, yeah, it's just for its for the sake of discussion, we want to start with kind of the idea of the Cold War and what was going on in America at the time. And there was this idea that Russia had planted nuclear missiles on Cuba. Again, I don't necessarily believe that this is the case. In my opinion, I don't even know if nukes are real.
So you're starting off this by saying that there was a country that we were planning on invading uh, about 60 or so years ago, or I
Yes,
guess
sir.
maybe 80, 70, 60, 80 years
No,
old.
660. You're correct. Your math was good.
Yeah. And then um, we were saying that they were going to have weapons of mass destruction, and this was uh, a long time ago.
Correct. The
Okay.
idea was that Russia had potentially planted nukes in Cuba, Cuba being a communist country. But as we know and have discussed, communism is Jewish. Um, the United States actually helped Castro come into power. There's an idea that Castro is Trudeau's father, and we're not going to get into any of that today. But we just wanted to set precedents and um, come forward with the idea that this is in the midst of the Cold War, and the American public are living in a state of constant tension, and they're running school drills where you hide under the table and so on should a nuke go off in the distance. But it's not just the political tension or the nuclear arms race and the espionage that was going on, but there was ideas that were put forth by the Department of Defense and a military proposal known as Operation Northwoods, and it was developed in the early 1960s, and it called for drastic measures, including acts of terrorism, to justify military intervention in Cuba. And I believe in some sense this ties back to the casinos that were run by a certain group of people in Cuba. And when Castro came into power, These casinos were banned, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know if it was like kind of like a Charlie Kirk situation where I'm a real boy, or it was all theater, which is what I lean towards. That this is, usually just a WWE situation where there's actors on both parts, Russia included,
What
and that
was this proposal that was put on JFK's desk?
so this proposal, it's top secret, and it was crafted by the U.S. Department of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1962. And the plan was aimed to create a pretext for military action against Fidel Castro's Cuba by orchestrating a false flag, and not just that, covert actions designed to look like they were perpetrated by Cuba, and it was setting up these Cuban exile refugees who were going to be taken from America after they've already, settled in, bedded in. They were brought on board through the CIA, and they were going to be placed back into Cuba in some capacity, and they were going to help facilitate an October 7th type event. And the premise of which would be that a the goal was simple. They were going to do a media campaign where these students, if I'm not mistaken, were a part of like a talent show. And what would transpire is they would go on a press tour around the United States, and they would hop on a plane. The plane would fly to a nearby Air Force base. They would exit off the plane, and then a remote controlled airplane would fly to Cuba and be shot down by said former Cuban refugees who had come to the United States, been recruited by the CIA, and they would help facilitate the said invasion, which would come to pass. It is a part of the Bay of Pigs operation.
So
In
hold on,
which
let me recap. So this is kind of complex, and I don't see where this has anything to do with 9/11. You're saying some art students were being selected to be flown around um, into in a building, uh, flown in a like a drone controlled airplane into buildings to cause us to invade a country that had nothing to do with the actual attack.
I think you got half of that right, but the other half was more or less associated with things to come, and we're gonna get there.
At the threat of weapons of mass destruction, correct?
I you're correct, and I guess we could call them art students. They were actors. They were, if I'm not mistaken, theater majors, involved in like a talent show of some sort.
And in
So
this country that was supposedly going to attack us, didn't really have much of a military of their own that they could use to really threaten us, correct? Or really any kind of like developed um, military.
no, the the idea was that they were harboring Russian nukes, working on behalf of communist Russia. But I mean, there's an idea that nukes don't even exist. But to to put it simply, they were creating a scenario, a false flag, as a pretext to drive a remote control plane towards Cuba to be shot down, which would cause a pretext for a outright war with Cuba and allow the United States to invade Cuba. similar to what we're going to find in 9/11. So the key objectives of Operation Northwoods, the goal was simple. It was to generate public and international support for military action against Cuba, similar to what we find in 9/11. And the document, which has been declassified, explicitly states the ultimate objective is overt military intervention. In number 5, I don't know where exactly this is found in the document, but it says, in as much as the ultimate objective is overt military intervention, it is recommended that the primary responsibility for developing military and paramilitary aspects of the plan for both overt and covert military operations be assigned the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So, to achieve this, the U.S. military planned to execute a series, of these deceptive events to make it appear as though Cuba was attacking the United States and its allies. And
And you're tying this to what happened in 2001.
correct. The idea being that they had remote control airplanes in 1962.
And they also didn't have cell phones that could reach up in the airplanes at that time to communicate and make sure that there were actually people inside the plane, correct?
Yeah, and even then, there's reason to believe that none of those phone calls ever were made, and had they been made, they were fabricated, and we might get into some of that. I might look up the particular individuals who had placed those phone calls. That is something I'm conscious of, but from what I understand and have read into regarding those phone calls, they were fabricated and were impossible to be made from uh in that particular scenario.
Oh, you're saying that there was evidence that there was phone calls made in the 2001 9/11 attack that
Well,
couldn't
some
be
state.
justified with any kind of evidence.
Correct.
And you're saying that we didn't have the technology back in the 60s either to do this?
Oh, definitely not in the 60s.
Okay.
I mean, unless you get into the idea that cell phones have been around since the 60s, sure. But then again, these would have been military um, conversations that were put forth. Any sort of communication in that capacity in that time period would have been done by military means and not by civilians.
Okay.
So
Actually, there was something actually that they used to use in Vietnam that they actually used to communicate, almost like a cell phone off of airplanes flying over there. I literally just was watching something about that not too
well,
long ago.
well, as you stated, military purposes,
Yeah,
not necessarily something that was put
all the way in
forth,
the 60s.
yeah, for civilian capacity. So, the Motorola brick came out in like 81, 82. I forget what year exactly, but that said, it's fair to say that any communications that may have been transponded were of a military capacity.
So, all right. And obviously, being a little tongue in cheek and I'm making
Yeah.
references to the parallels of the Israeli art students that completely denied their involvement and then quickly rushed out of the country. Um, Much like many Israelis, whenever something uh, really off happens and they get tied a little bit to it, and it's clear that they had something to do with it. So, um, is there anything on the fact sheet that you want to play or talk about, or do you want me to play any videos yet
Do me a
of?
favor, play a video, and I just need to step away for the shortest moment. I have the urge to take a piss. I'm sorry, buddy.
Okay, I'm gonna go and play um, them talking about the World Trade Center collapsing real quick.
On September 11th, there was worldwide live television coverage, and the coverage continued throughout the day. The interesting thing is that at 10 p.m.
Let me go ahead and I have that in the wrong spot. My bad. There we go. Okay, now you should be able to see
London
that.
time, which is 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, they reported that the Salomon Brothers building, Building 7, had collapsed. The only problem is Building 7 didn't collapse until 5:20 p.m. New York time.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center...
Building 7 is clearly visible right behind the reporter. It wasn't until 5:20 Eastern Time that it came down. Buildings 4, 5, and 6 maintained heavy damage from falling debris from the towers, and yet they remained standing.
Whoa.
All right. So was there anything in Operation Northwoods that was anything like that related to other buildings, or did they have anything talking about demolitions in any of those papers?
No, the idea was that it was going to be shot down by an RPG by Cuban rebels. It wasn't necessarily aimed at striking a particular building, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, because I thought that they wanted to fly it into a building in in Florida, like in southeast Florida, is what I thought.
Oh, that may be the case. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's just peek at the article I pulled up. So it was planning on attacking U.S. Or allied ships or aircraft. So these are some of the discussed proposals. Blowing up buildings was another proposal. Orchestrating attacks on American citizens. In reality, it would be staged by the U.S. military itself. Sabotage U.S. military equipment and stage assassinations of Cuban exiles. So you know what? You're correct. There were these outlines proposed, but I hadn't been aware that they had considered flying it into a building in Florida. I assumed that the crux of the false flag would have been being shot down by this Cuban paramilitary group when entering Cuban airspace, as the precedent for engaging in war with Cuba.
And then,
that was proposed. No, you're right. That was proposed.
And here is, because we were talking about planes being shot down. Here is Donald. Let me close this. Donald Rumsfeld speaking about shooting down Flight 93, which also Dick Cheney slipped up at one point when I was playing that video on when I did solo about 9/11, where they kind of can't decide if they shot it down or if they didn't shoot it down. So this is Donald Rumsfeld saying basically they shot it down.
Would face if the people who bombed the Best Hall in Mosul, or the people who did the bombing in Spain, or the people who attacked the United States in New York, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania and attacked the Pentagon.
Yeah. It's
So
it's
when-
weird how they like they
when was
slip
that?
up. That was Donald Rumsfeld after this happened. But I had a video on my last stream of also Dick Cheney at one point saying they didn't, and then another one where they said they did shoot it down. The later when he said they did shoot it down was a lot more recent. I'd say probably within the last 7 years or so.
Well, as you and I both know that on September the 10th in 2001, Donald Rumsfeld had announced that the Pentagon was missing $2.3 trillion.
Oh, okay. So that's also, since you're gonna talk about that, let me bring up.
It's a bit of a non sequitur, but it's relevant, being we're bringing up the man. Yeah, $2.3 million missing from the Pentagon. And the building that happened to be the budget analyst office, where the DoD staff were working on the missing $2.3 trillion, happened to be hit by, forget the number of the plane, it's relevant. I believe it was struck by a missile. If you've looked at some of the images and clips, there's no remnants of a plane. There are no Boeing 767 4-ton engines to be found. It's random debris. The camera footage was either confiscated or not active at the time on all angles, which could have viewed said plane. The plane would have had to fly and skim across the grass like someone playing disc golf looking for a skip shot. It's all fallacy, and even pilots have discussed it. It's impossible to fly a plane that low and maintain a certain degree of altitude.
So that particular plane, sorry, I guess I had myself muted for a second. That particular plane, and I've got a video pulled up on Project Hammer and the black budget and them paying for things with treasuries, I believe it was, or the sale of treasuries. But so you started to mention that the two offices, one building that got hit, I don't remember which one it was, had the office of a group that checked for money laundering through all the agencies. The other one that got hit was a company that what was it? Well, they'll explain it in the video. That was shorted, I believe. So what was the other thing? And then you started to talk about the plane hitting the Pentagon at such an odd angle.
Correct.
The thing that was very odd about that plane, aside from the flight that it made, is I'm not so sure about the missile theory. It's weird that they don't have any more video than those like 4 frames from those 2 cameras in the security guard office.
Oh,
And
it
then-
could have just been explosives planted. I mean, either or. It's hard to necessarily say definitively, being we don't have much evidence, but It
I well,
clearly wasn't a plane.
I think a plane hit it. I just don't know what the like explosion was. I know that there wasn't a lot of debris found, right, from like the impact. It like basically got pulverized or like completely just dissipated. There was like nothing found.
It was turned to like confetti, more or less. And the idea being, if a flock of birds hit a plane at certain speeds, it puts a dent in the nose of said plane. It can travel straight through the windshield. This bird, if they run into like hail, it'll put dents. Like, if planes are made of fiberglass and thin sheets of aluminum, they're quite susceptible
S-
to damage, and the wings would have broken off.
You know, actually, as you say that, the other thing that's odd too is so the only other like the witness, there's a special for the Pentagon in that security sector, intelligence sector. There was a special gas station that was only for
Military personnel.
for military personnel, and the only person that was like close witness saw that it flew directly over it and then hit some light posts over the highway and then continued to fly in the exact manner without any obstruction straight at like, just a few feet above the ground, straight into the building.
This is what is alleged, and I've seen that video. And the question is, who is this individual? Who does he work for?
So
And
that
why is
guy,
why is he the one who happens to be the sole witness and person giving their eyewitness account of what transpired? It does seem to me that many of the people who were interviewed happened to be planted and brought in to speak specifically on behalf of the government to plant narratives and steer misdirection. But I could be wrong.
that's pretty interesting. Monarch Black in the chat says, I was in the military when it happened. One of my supervisors was in DC and called me to say the Pentagon is on fire. He still swears that there was absolutely no plane. Because as you were saying that, so the excuse, like if I'm playing devil's advocate,
Yeah, please do.
so they fly low and then they hit just above the highway. They hit a couple of light posts. So those light posts, I would think, would really cause you a problem to like, if a bird hits you, you're
They're
getting
removing the
dents.
wings. Yeah, they're removing the wings, students.
So that shears those things out, and I would assume knock you off a course at the very least, even if your wings stayed intact. And then all it did was kind of knock them down, and then continuing to fly a perfect angle. And the other thing that was odd about that flight was, aside from them telling, or Dick Cheney telling people that there was, I believe it was Secretary of Transportation Mineta swore under testimony, that there was a stand down order for taking it down. But the plane originally, like the actual pilot, was a really, really ace pilot. He had like really high honors. He was extremely good at his job. And then somehow, before it hit the Pentagon, it made some crazy angled turn and flight maneuver that everyone under like testimony, like the expert testimony, said that would be extremely difficult unless you were a really good pilot. But the thing is that
or a remote controlled.
but that plane was hijacked by a guy who didn't do any of his homework, was, according to the person they interviewed that gave him the flight instruction or flight uh, courses, said he was probably one of the worst pilots or worst students he ever had. And supposedly that guy took over the plane and then did something that only the guy that was flying it originally could possibly pull off. After hitting some light posts and then skimming the ground extremely low into the side of the building, leaving barely any trace of anything, and that part of the Pentagon had just been reinforced, and the rest of the building had been untouched. They just did a rebuilding of that section of the Pentagon. So that was just kind of,
And then that's an interesting thing to consider, that the Pentagon had recently went through a refurbishment and been structurally built up in some particular capacity, but they neglected this particular area, you say?
they hit only the area that they had just done, like reinforced. So if it had hit any other part of the building, it would have killed a lot more people.
So does it sound to you like they actually reinforced anything, or that maybe it's similar to what we'll see a little bit later on when discussing the BB-18 charges that were placed, and that maybe it wasn't a plane at all? Maybe it was, but that an explosion or a missile may have caused it, from what you're stating, because I had heard this at some point, and I didn't have it in my notes or was ready to discuss it, but it sounds like there were construction work going on to this particular area, and that could lay precedent for what we'll discuss later with the I believe it was floor 74 through, I don't know, 78 or something of that nature.
I have that
where
pulled up of the fuses.
correct, and we're going to get to that, and just for the sake of we could just flash it to give people a little bit of an understanding, but there were people inside the Pentagon doing construction work similar to these art students. And what might have they been doing? Maybe they were painting the beams with thermite. Maybe they were planting explosives. Maybe they were setting precedent for what would come to pass to allow this hole to be created without a 4-ton engine bashing a hole through a concrete / cinder block wall in whatever capacity the Pentagon engineering structure was built to. The idea that there's no remnants of these turbines when traveling at the speeds they're alleged to have crashed into the building at, I could see the wings somehow being turned to confetti and blown to smithereens, but you would think that these chunks of steel and high grade aluminum and titanium would have been in some way, shape, or form intact and retrievable, and would have created holes in the buildings in their particular placement in which they impacted the building, and they didn't.
Actually, before we play that video, I want to play just a short clip of them talking about how some of the hijackers attended military schools in America.
And
Constantly watching the development.
Sorry, you had something to say?
I was just going to say, just for the sake of setting preface for what's going to be played, I don't believe there were any hijackers.
Okay.
And that's just my 2 cents. I believe this gets back to Operation Northwoods and remote control airplanes.
Okay.
On the investigative front, and I can tell you that our national security producer, Chris Plant, is reporting that the Defense Department's investigating the possibility, as hard as this is to believe, that 2 of the alleged terrorists involved in what happened on Tuesday may have attended schools run by the U.S. military. Now, this is according to a senior defense official. This official didn't reveal the names in question, so we don't know whom he's talking about or other specifics, such as what kinds of schools they may have attended. But the official said 2 of the names released on Friday by the Justice Department matching the names of people who had attended schools or courses sponsored by the U.S. military under a foreign military exchange program. Now, I should say that officials at the Pentagon are cautioning it's possible that these matching names are merely a coincidence or that the terrorists were using false identities. And of course, we've been pointing that out on CNN all day long, that they may have taken on the identities of other people. Pentagon officials also wanting us to know that military officers from many countries around the world attend these U.S. military academies or courses every year. So this is done all the time, but what irony it would be if it turned out that one of these terrorists had been to school at a U.S. military-sponsored course. You're watching.
So the other interesting thing about that is I remember in 2000, it was during the Obama administration, I believe it was like 2008 or 2012, a Saudi, it was either 1 or 2 Saudi, basically in this same situation where we did like an exchange program and we were training a couple of Saudis here, went and shot up a military base. I believe it was a Navy base here in America. And what was the other thing that I was going to say? The other thing about that too is we did that with another guy that was the Louisiana guy. I believe he was a foreigner serving in our military that had Middle Eastern background as well. The guy that drove like through that crowd of people and then went to pull out a rifle, and then the cops like just shot him up into Swiss cheese in Louisiana. So like it seems to be a reoccurring pattern, and I haven't really figured out why they keep putting the blame on Saudi Arabia. Aside from maybe one thing that I could think of is, as I've discussed a few times with the Iraq invasion and what this all led into, was that they were trying to get oil from Iran into Israel through hidden pipelines many a time. And one of the best routes to take oil from over there, instead of going around the entire Middle Eastern peninsula, would be to just go straight through Saudi Arabia. And
well, just to preface the idea of Saudi Arabia being involved, I think it's important to understand that Saudi Arabia was created by Great Britain. The individual who became the first king of the House of Saud was a MI6 agent. I don't recall his original name prior to being labeled Ibn al blah 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 Saud or Saud, but the kingdom of Saudi Arabia was created by the Rothschilds and worked at the behest and has worked at the behest of the United States and the Rothschilds for the sake of creating an outpost in the Middle East prior to the establishment of the state of Israel. And this was shortly after the Balfour Declaration. I think Saudi Arabia became a nation in like 1913 or something along those lines, if I'm not mistaken. So it coincided just in line with the years just before the Balfour Declaration, and it was perpetrated by MI6, and they were a group of nomads who were very disliked amongst the local people. And British Petroleum at the time had done some surveys in the area and found that there was oil, and they needed someone who would work on their behalf to help them establish this outpost who would be beholden to them. And they sent an MI6 agent who would go on to become the first king of Saud.
Okay. Yeah, I remember a little bit of that history. That one I'm a little gray on, but I know I've heard that before.
We're going to do an episode on that, and the idea is that they're all Jews as well. So there's going to be a deep dive in that. Once we get caught up with history and we get past 9/11, COVID, October 7th, and where we're currently at today, we're going to do deep dives into individual subjects and involving these discussed topics.
Okay. This is a video on Project Hammer. Bush's proposed plan to use bonds to pay for military operations. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. If you have anything to say, just start talking and I'll pause it.
Copy that.
In September 1991, shortly after the end of the Cold War, a cabal of elite bankers and intelligence spooks led by George H.W. Bush financed a $240 billion covert operations war chest through the purchase of 10-year securities that, as it happened, were scheduled to come due on September 12, 2001. Project Hammer was undoubtedly used for a wide variety of illicit intelligence operations, but mainly it was used to finance a covert economic operation against the collapsing Soviet Union, whereby unknown Western investors bought up much of the Soviet industry with a focus on oil and gas, crashing the Russian economy, looting its central bank, orchestrating what became known as the Great Ruble Scam, and a wide variety of other clandestine, state-assisted operations designed to thoroughly prevent Russia from ever contesting the U.S. as a world superpower, while in the process lining the pockets of these economic hitmen who swooped in to devour the collapsing Russian economy after the fall of the Soviet Union. A spectacular investment for all, at least until money laundering investigations began tracing all the money, or when the 10-year deadline came up and the securities became due and began the routine process of authenticity and ownership checks. Evidence shows that several federal and private investigations had already stumbled upon the Hammer Fund and were compiling evidence on it up until the 9/11 attacks. These included the Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, which was moved to the outer E-ring of the recently renovated section of the Pentagon that was targeted and destroyed on 9/11.
See, that's what I was talking about, the recently
Renovated
area.
Correct.
According to E.P. Heidner, the ONI had been investigating crimes associated with the plundering
Hold on,
of
go back to that image.
Yeah, I knew you were going to.
What are we talking about here?
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
That nothing to
I
see
saw
here.
that and I was like, this is ridiculous.
So it's the pyramid, essentially the all-seeing eye, and the light illuminating from it in the form of rays.
Nah, don't worry about that, man.
Oh boy, that's fun.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, this is ridiculous. I mean, they're not even trying right now.
No, they're telling you.
Oh yeah, Sunshine said that they're releasing his friend messaged him, Trump's got the peace deal, he's releasing the hostages, and he told him enjoy the show. Yeah, that's what I'm like with the hostages thing, and we'll talk about Trump. Actually, I got a video on him relating to this. It's like, if anybody believes that this is the end of this with the hostages being released, like, all they're gonna do is get the hostages and then just fucking start attacking or making a false flag.
I would go as far as to say that there are no hostages. Those are all Israeli Mossad agents, former members of the IDF, and Hamas is IDF agents in masks masquerading as freedom fighters, which is why they were given kisses and gifts when they were released. But when Palestinians are released from IDF control, they're fucking extremely traumatized. So it in my opinion, it's again theater. It's WWF shit. But yeah,
well,
maybe they're hostages. Maybe not.
All I know is that they're gonna go and attack them once, whatever excuse that they have. To say
Oh yeah,
that
they'll
they
say
have
Hamas
hostage.
shot a rocket or something along those
Yeah,
lines. and
they'll
pick up
say
where
that
left
they.
off.
Yeah, they'll say that they did something to end the ceasefire, and then they can finish what they were doing. So, all right.
Investigating.
And also, were you listening when he was talking about the building where they were housing
The
money
the
laundering?
ONI?
And, yeah.
Yeah, correct. I just hopped off the image for a second because I needed to I took a quick piss in a
Crimes
again.
associated with the plundering of Russia. 39 out of the 40 people who worked in those offices were killed on 9/11, including the entire chain of command. The Pentagon's financial accounting offices in that same wing were also an obvious target, as were the passengers on board Flight 77.
So that's pretty interesting. That's another thing that was really interesting about the people that were on the supposed flight were all very, like, just all of them, like almost every seat of these planes was occupied by really high-ranking military officials or members of Raytheon, like employees of the defense contractors.
So I proposed the idea that they were either never killed, and it's similar to the Columbia Space Shuttle
I was going to
disaster,
say that, yeah.
where these people were just swooped off to take up positions of influence elsewhere, or put into a certain degree of witness protection, and given alternate identities where they would be given a hefty sum of funds and told to live a quiet life and lay low, or they were privy to certain information which caused the powers that be to clip them. And it's one or the other, and either way it achieves their goal by either happening.
Of whom coincidentally held top-secret clearances and were connected with Pentagon black operations. Agents of the Office of Naval Intelligence had also been investigating financial transactions which were linked to securities being managed by those securities dealers in the World Trade Center that were also targeted. 31% of the 125 fatalities in the Pentagon were from the Naval Command Center that housed the Office of Naval Intelligence. 41% of the fatalities in the Twin Towers came from two companies that managed U.S. government securities, Cantor Fitzgerald and Eurobrokers.
So that goes back to this Project Hammer thing, where they were going to these brokers groups that were managing these securities that were 10-year bonds or securities that we're going to have to, that we had sold in order to pay for things, and then we were going to have to pay them back on the day after September 11th. Just so happened to be the offices that got hit by one of the first planes into the World Trade Centers.
There were three major security brokers in the World Trade Center: Cantor Fitzgerald, Eurobrokers, and Garbin Intercapital. At 8:46 on the morning of September 11th, Flight 11 flew directly into Marshall McLennan's secure computer room in the North Tower, right below the floor on which Cantor Fitzgerald was situated. Cantor Fitzgerald was the largest security dealer in the U.S. Shortly after that, a massive explosion went off just under the FBI offices in the North Tower on the 23rd floor.
You know what's also kind of odd too is in OKC, the floors that were occupied, I believe, just below where the major damage was done, and all those kids were in there, like the nursery,
Daycare center, yeah.
the daycare center. They had been evacuated, and they were just a floor either above or below, and there was rumors of them having explosive devices that were not supposed to be in the building. And that's why they had to get everybody out.
Was that the case, or were these children child trafficked? Did they actually get out? We don't know. So
didn't really think about that.
Maybe these kids were somehow removed in some capacity. We don't even know what happened to these kids. So it's whenever I hear kids involved, I usually think of child trafficking with the government. So,
God damn, that's really fucking dark.
But yeah, I didn't mean to go down that non sequitur, but yeah.
Okay, so they're talking about here what are the floors above and below where the planes hit, and they were just talking about the companies that were holding and managing the treasuries that were due to be paid up the day after 9/11.
Fires were reported on the 22nd floor at 8:47. There were also explosions and subsequent fires reported at Garbin Intercapital on the 25th floor and in the basement of Tower 1 as well. Shortly thereafter, at 9:03, Flight 175 hit the South Tower right below the floors on which Eurobrokers was situated. In all three cases, the explosive, fiery destruction consumed the offices and the several floors above, destroying files and trapping victims inside. In the midst of all this, Building 6 was destroyed by an explosion that took place before either tower fell. This secondary explosion took out a portion of the building which just happened to include the El Dorado Task Force's offices. The El Dorado Task Force was an interagency money laundering watchdog group responsible for coordinating all major money laundering investigations in the U.S. In the immediate aftermath of September 11th, these groups would be redirected to investigate terrorist financing. Building 6 was located directly between...
Yep.
Not Building 7.
Building 6.
Building 6. Okay.
Yep.
Not a lot of people are familiar with Building 6.
I always forget about it.
It's important to mention that Building 6, I believe there's a Building 4 as well. Peace Dozer had it on one of the clips that I pulled up. I didn't dive much into Building 4, but I was aware of Building 5 and Building 6. Building 7, and as we know, World Trade Center Towers 1 and 2. But yeah, see, these are some of the auxiliary buildings that were brought down without a plane crashing into them. Buildings which should have withstood a little bit of debris falling on them.
And oddly enough, just like the buildings around them, completely unfazed.
Yeah, completely intact.
Some of them that don't even look like they were built nearly as like with the same structural like integrity.
Correct.
Between the North Tower and World Trade Center Building 7. While large portions of World Trade Center 6 were gutted by explosions and later by falling debris from the North Tower, the building itself did not suffer a global symmetric collapse at near freefall acceleration as did Buildings 1, 2, and 7. FEMA photographer and 9/11 whistleblower Kurt Sonnenfeld took some interesting pictures of the U.S. Customs vault in the basement of World Trade Center 6, which was found completely empty and left with the door wide open. All of its contents appear to have been looted during the attacks. There is also evidence that
contained vast amounts of gold.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's pretty lucky for whoever got all that gold. It was a leprechaun.
Follow me, Lucky Charms. You know.
Like the leprechaun that was in the hood. You remember that?
I've never seen that leopard. I haven't seen any of them, but I bet that was a good one. I bet it was rather entertaining.
No, okay. You haven't seen the viral video that was like in the 90s or 2000s of the black people claiming there was a leprechaun in this one ghetto.
I have seen that video and it's quite entertaining. Yes,
To me, it looked like a crackhead.
Oh,
Anyways, all right.
That's fun though.
Was being looted from the vaults beneath World Trade Center.
You know, the gold's pretty heavy. Those bars look pretty fucking heavy.
Which means it was cleared out prior in an extensive operation, which allowed them to remove, from what I gather, tons of gold.
Uh-oh. There's a leprechaun in the chat.
Slav
no, it's Genesee Ben. He's got the leprechaun in the hood avatar.
I love it.
All right.
Thanks
But
for
yeah,
joining us, Genesee.
do you know anything about so I know obviously World Trade Center 7 had work done on it. They were doing the tests and they were doing the work on it the day of or the day before. And so they had everything evacuated. Was there anything similar to World Trade Center 6?
I couldn't say. I haven't done enough research on 6, but what I know from 6 is just from this particular clip here, and what I remember, if I'm not mistaken, they were investigating and housed documents related to fraud in the Pentagon, similar to what was going on in the wings of the Pentagon that housed the ONI and were destroyed. So it was a building which housed branches of government responsible for auditing what was transpiring in relation to the $2.3 trillion that was missing from the Pentagon.
They did just happen to find a shit ton of gold in Saddam's palace as well.
Oh, yeah.
And they made a movie about it.
It's those damn Iraqis, huh? That one with Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, the Kings movie.
I got to get that Iraqi gold. Yeah, I look at those as those sort of films that are just designed to steer the narrative and create misdirection rather than helping people understand that it's buried in, no, I wouldn't say buried, but held in, vaults and bunkers in Israel at this point. And, everyone got their little slice of the pie, and majority of those slices were held by Israel and Jews.
I mean, you can't keep playing this.
4. There were several early reports of a 10-wheel truck packed with stolen bullion caught fleeing World Trade Center 5 when the vehicle had become stuck on a collapsed ceiling brace, forcing the driver to flee the scene. Many researchers have stumbled across one or two of these anomalies from time to time: the empty vaults, the secondary explosions, the fireproofing upgrades on the exact floors coinciding with failure.
Okay, I didn't know about this fireproofing upgrade in those. Oh, are they talking about the fireproofing that was sprayed on the rafters? Do you know what I'm talking about?
To me, that coincides with spraying the nanothermite material, which was used to melt the beams.
That is where it started to collapse. I know, right there where they said that a couple of floors just so happened to vanish.
And there is a still image that I had in my files. I don't believe I sent it to you, but it appears to show a complete pulverization of certain floors where they exploded into dust, and it wasn't necessarily structural collapse. And as we know and have discussed here, that it was a controlled demolition. But the idea being not just controlled demolition, that there was the need as a result of the building and the manner in which it was structurally engineered to be decimated. And it not only did it have an interior structure of these concrete and steel columns, it had an exoskeleton of steel, which would have prevented it from collapsing should it be impacted by a plane. It was designed to withstand the impact of a plane. This is the first instance in history where a skyscraper collapsed as the result of this sort of impact. And let alone that being the case, there have been skyscrapers that have burned for 24 hours plus. One transpired in Argentina. Others have burned for 18 hours, 16 hours, and the buildings never collapsed. They didn't topple in the fashion that one might should it suffer structural deficiencies as a result of said impacts. What transpired was a implosion as a result of thermite being sprayed onto the structural beams, which allowed the building to stand upright.
Tom says that was a lot of fuel, though.
Jet fuel can't melt steel beams, doesn't burn hot enough.
Well, aside from that, though, the other thing that I learned recently that makes that a moot point, from what I saw, and when you see the explosion from the building, and it makes sense, is jet fuel ignites extremely at like it's very combustible. So all of that would have exploded and burned almost immediately.
Correct.
And that's what you can see in the video, that giant fireball, all of it combusting. Because the thing about the thing about jet fuel and jets, they have a different fuel versus what's a more like reliable plane for like skydiving. I remember talking to somebody that does skydiving,
like biplanes.
Yeah, and they use basically like a fuel that's kind of like diesel fuel. It's got a heavy lead. And what that does is stops it from having like a knock, if you know anything about vehicles, in the engine, and it makes it so it doesn't pre-combust. What Tom is asking, what about all the other materials inside? Can they burn hotter? And I'm not like bashing you for asking questions. Like that's what this is
a good question.
And actually, so they have a demonstration because they did a bunch of tests. I don't have the video here, but they did.
The building was riddled with asbestos and was designed to withstand fire. And one of the reasons that Lucky Larry took out the insurance policy and decided to involve himself with the U.S. government and have these planes brought down is because it would have cost him upwards of $2 to $4 billion just to have the asbestos removed. So with that said, the building was designed to avoid burning, and there were firewalls set in place and building codes and things of that nature to prevent a fire spreading from one floor to the next.
Well, not only that though, but when they did these tests, they did like a mock-up of all of like the offices, because one of the reasonings were that that they gave that it created such a hot fires. They were saying that it was all the things that were inside that could combust, like the paper or
Oh,
the
that paper, huh?
couches.
All those
And
couches,
when they did that, they performed the test, like literally set up office buildings with steel girders and with multiple floors, and they let it burn. And even when it did get to completely combusting and completely on fire, yes, it did slightly stress the steel beams, but not anything more than just deforming them slightly. And
Well,
they were still like they still had plenty of
let's
structural integrity.
let's consider this idea. You ever sit around a fire pit that was made of like a steel cauldron, and you could throw in cherry, oak, hickory, and we're not talking paper. We're talking, logs, and that thing could burn for hours. Does it melt or deform?
Or even really get red hot.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's silly to even consider the idea that these structural steel beams of a thickness that was designed to be like the spine of your back, 4 of them could have been in some way, shape, or form warped, let alone imploded on themselves, is preposterous. And that doesn't even begin to discuss the exoskeleton and structure that the exterior of the building had. So it's just
the building
silly.
was also reinforced so that, like, I believe it was designed to handle like 5 times whatever weight it was supporting. And then also, like, I know that when I, like, for instance, have had to get like break nuts off on working on a car or just anything that's metal where the nut is rusted up, and you got to heat that thing and you got to get that thing red hot. And the only way to do that is to like really sit there with like a propane torch.
Yeah.
And even then
Acetylene
it's not melting.
torch. Yeah.
It's just kind of
expanding a little bit to loosen it up. That's all.
Yeah. So it is pretty wild for them to go like say that the papers or the office supplies and the couches were anywhere near that, or with the jet fuel, that even if there was jet fuel that stayed around long enough to be an accelerant and continue to burn it.
No, it would have combusted immediately. And like if you set up a propane tank, or you shoot it with a bullet in an incendiary round and make that propane tank explode, it doesn't keep burning for fucking 6 hours or 4 hours. The fire's gone.
Yeah.
In a plume of smoke and fire. And what remains is the organic material that continues to burn. It's not complicated.
An impact in the towers, the suspicious power downs and evacuation drills, the World Trade Center tenants and security firms like AIG, Marsh & McLennan, and Kroll, and their close ties with the intelligence community, etc., etc. These anomalies are not unrelated, but nevertheless became lost inside the chaos of that September morn, the aftermath, and subsequent cover-ups. Okay, so what does all this mean? Overall, a critical mass of brokers from the major government security brokerages in the Twin Towers had to be eliminated to create chaos in the government securities market. A situation needed to be created wherein $240 billion of covert securities could be electronically cleared without anyone asking questions, which happened when the Federal Reserve declared an emergency and invoked its emergency powers that very afternoon. On September 14th, the Securities and Exchange Commission declared a national emergency and for the first time in U.S. history invoked its emergency powers under the Securities Exchange Act Section 12K and eased regulatory restrictions for clearing and settling security trades for the next 15 days. These changes would have allowed the estimated $240 billion in covert government securities to be cleared upon maturity without the standard regulatory controls around identification of ownership. The towers needed to be demolished to create a big enough mess that the illicit activities taking place behind the scenes that morning could be hidden in the confusion of that day. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about who did it and how. 9/11 whistleblower Richard Andrew Grove was a software salesperson for a company called Silverstream. Silverstream's technology was on the cutting edge of internet solutions, offering software to web-enable the critical business functions of Fortune 500 companies, basically integrating and making available on the web the disparate legacy applications and mainframes while simultaneously streamlining workflow and traditional paper processes, with an end result being a lower cost of operation and more efficient transactions. Silverstream had built internet transactional and trading platforms for Merrill Lynch, Deutsche Bank, Bankers Trust, Alex Brown, and Morgan Stanley, to name a few. Leading up to 9/11, Silverstream was designing specialized accounting software for a major client, Marsh & McLennan. Marsh is the world's largest insurance brokerage and was located right below Cantor Fitzgerald in the North Tower. Approximately 295 Marsh employees were murdered that morning, along with other innocent victims and employees who either knew too much or too little about their chosen work environment. But most importantly, Silverstream provided a specific type of connectivity that was used to link AIG and Marsh & McLennan, the first two commercial companies on the planet to employ this type of transaction. What then were Marsh and AIG doing, and why did they need to leverage technologies that no other commercial entity on the face of the earth needed to use to conduct business? The recovered hard drives from the World Trade Center, combined with Richard Grove's testimony, give us some intriguing clues. Grove discovered that Silverstream was overbilling Marsh to the tune of $7 million extra for fictitious and unneeded hardware. He also became aware of an exploitable flaw in the accounting software that had been sold to a variety of Marsh's clients and partners. When he brought this up to his superiors at Silverstream and others at Marsh, he was told to keep quiet and not to worry about
it. It's kind of funny. That's the plot to Office Space.
Yeah, I love that movie. I think it's one of the best movies, and one of my favorite characters in the film is the neighbor with the handlebar mustache and the beautiful mullet.
Listening through the walls.
Yeah. Turn on Channel 9. The breast exams is on.
And Tom says, I understand that they did their best to make it survive an airplane hitting it when they designed it. That was the one thing that I also thought was kind of weird, is that because they did a study and did all the calculations supposedly in 1964, when they determined that the plane, or that the building could get hit by a 707, I believe they said it was, that flies at approximately 600 or 600 something miles an hour. And the planes that hit the World Trade Center were hit it at approximately 434 miles per hour. So the only thing that I don't understand why, like, they don't even dispute that, because, like, the easy thing for them to say, like, the government would be to say is that they didn't have the same technology for measuring, these impacts that they did,
Sure, they could use that as a pretext for claiming that they hadn't calculated the possibilities originally, when technology would be later developed which could surpass the original planning for the structural integrity of the building. But
they don't even dispute that study, though. That's just so weird.
Exactly.
But other friends of his at Marsh were also getting concerned and began documenting what was going on and raising concerns within the company. At last, they were finally granted a hearing with one of Marsh's high-ranking executives and were told to bring all their evidence to a hearing scheduled for 8:30 a.m. on September 11, 2001, on the 93rd floor. The high-ranking member of Marsh, who Grove did not name, would participate via teleconference from the safety of his home, while Marsh employees and potential whistleblowers, Gary Lasko, Catherine Lee, Ken Rice, Richard Brewhart, and John Oltzhofer would die in the meeting room in the North Tower with all their evidence when American Airlines Flight 11 would impact that very section of the building. Richard Grove fortunately got stuck in traffic that morning and didn't make it. Computer hard drives.
Oh, that guy's pretty lucky, huh?
Dude, that New York traffic will get you.
It will. Let's see. Tom says, and I mean, the fact that a plane never brought a building down before, I mean, right there, that is a first for everything. That's what the argument to me. I don't mean to be a dick. It wasn't the, weren't they hit by a plane actually before? Wasn't there a crash?
I believe
into the...
other skyscrapers have been hit by planes and they weren't brought down.
No, I thought the World Trade Center got hit by a plane one time.
Oh, that's a good question. I
believe it wasn't quite a jetliner, but I'm pretty sure there was a plane crash into the World Trade Center, which, by the way, the next video that I'll play also is talking about the impacts of a truck bomb.
The 1993.
Yeah. So
I'm going to be off camera for a moment. I just want to let you know so that you're not concerned. But I'll be participating. I'm just off camera.
Okay.
Recovered from the World Trade Center show a spike in suspicious transfers that took place within the World Trade Center as the 9/11 attacks were unfolding. Richard Grove is convinced that these suspicious money transfers were performed electronically using Silverstream software, and that the overbilling of Marsh was hush money for the operations. It would certainly have helped clear up that $240 billion in securities and make it look like any of those companies might have done it. The recovered hard drives and financial transactions from 9/11 all show clear evidence that something was going on that morning. Marsh's CEO at the time was Jeffrey Greenberg, the son of Maurice Greenberg of AIG. Most insurance companies were hurting badly in late 2001 after $40 billion in insurance settlements had been paid out for the devastation caused by the 9/11 attacks. Yet one insurance company did not suffer quite the same losses as the other companies did. American International Group, or AIG as it turns out, is much more than an insurance company. With its long ties to the intelligence community, AIG was founded by OSS operative Cornelius V. Starr, 2 R's, the uncle of Clinton's friend Kenneth Starr. AIG currently operates a complex network of shell companies and other entities which operate internationally and have been used for clandestine intelligence gathering and other covert activities for decades. The company that ran security in the World Trade Center, Kroll Associates, was owned by AIG.
Could you pause for me? I wanted to mention that Kroll Associates is more than likely associated with Nick Kroll's father. I forget his name, but he is the individual who went on to create Black Cube, which is the private, not necessarily security, but investigative firm that is responsible for high-level contracts with elite corporations involved in lawsuits. And what Black Cube does is they harass, intimidate, and dig up quote-unquote dirt, whether real or manufactured, to discredit the individuals involved in the lawsuit. Harvey Weinstein hired them during his Me Too situation and the alleged coercion and rapes which he was involved in, and Black Cube being associated with Saturn, as I've discussed at various times. So Kroll is, if I am not mistaken, an Israeli citizen or dual citizen, and his son went on to become quite big on MTV with the Nick Kroll show, and
I'm pretty sure that's true.
MTV being an arm or finger of Viacom, which is also owned by Jews.
The CEO of AIG on 9/11 was a guy named Morris Greenberg, who was actually nominated for the position of Director of Central Intelligence after he authored a report for the Council on Foreign Relations, of which he's a high-ranking member, where he advocated that FBI and Drug Enforcement Agency agents operating abroad should not be allowed to act independently of either the ambassador or the CIA, lest pursuit of evidence or individuals for prosecution cause major foreign policy problems or complicate ongoing intelligence and diplomatic activities. Of course, this type of policy is essentially a continuation of things like Executive Order 12333 and the CIA-assisted Contra cocaine trafficking that went on as an immediate result.
And then also, so as he's talking about how they were laundering money through the Contras and the cocaine, after we invaded Iraq, we went into Afghanistan and we're protecting
Poppy fields.
Poppy fields.
Yeah. Which would become the precedent for the opioid crisis in the United States with the Sackler family and OxyContin, which would eventually develop into the fentanyl crisis after getting hundreds of thousands and then millions of Americans hooked on opiates. We are essentially under attack in the same fashion that China was during the Opium Wars. In those times, it was Great Britain and China who forced China to open their borders and legalize trade with these foreign invaders. When they had closed borders at the time, when we know that Britain had been taken over and influenced by Jews since at least the 1100s, based on the discussion that we had in, I think it's episode 2 or 3. And this information could be found in a history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind by Stephen Gifford Milton. I beg your pardon, Stephen Gifford Milton.
These backdoor agreements opened the floodgates for government drug money laundering and narco-trafficking. Former LAPD narcotics detective turned whistleblower Michael Rupert has written a series of excellent articles documenting AIG's involvement in drug money laundering, undoubtedly revealing yet another motive for the invasion of Afghanistan, a country which currently produces over 90% of the world's heroin supply. Drugs are arguably the most profitable commodity on the entire international market, and drug money was undoubtedly a motive behind the invasion of Afghanistan and consequently the 9/11 attacks. While companies like AIG launder the drug money for big banks, the actual drug production and trafficking can be traced back to the same Iran-Contra affiliates like Richard Armitage and Frank Carlucci. Unfortunately, that rabbit hole is a bit too deep and off-topic to get into here. I will mention that DynCorp was heavily involved, as well as Stewart Air Force Base in upstate New York, where the two flights out of Boston crossed paths simultaneously and shut off their transponders before making their way to the Twin Towers. Many researchers believe that the MENA operation was moved to Stewart Air Force Base after Barry Seal got whacked. Richard Armitage was the Deputy Secretary of State on 9/11, and according to whistleblower Michael Springman, he was the man responsible for granting visas to 15 out of 19 of the 9/11 hijackers, allowing them to enter the U.S. and pursue flight training. Frank Carlucci is the chairman of the Carlyle Group and was in Washington, D.C. on 9/11, having just met with George H.W. Bush and the brother of Osama bin Laden on Carlyle Group business. Frank Carlucci was also the chairman of BDM International, a company that served as a front for State Department black operations. Frank Carlucci's employees at BDM International left to take charge of Stratesec, the World Trade Center and airport security firm. Corporate Operating Officer Barry W. McDaniel, an ex-military expert in logistics and materials distribution, and CEO Wirt Dexter Walker III, who is a distant Bush cousin from the Herbert Walker line, with an extensive history of managing CIA front companies. Marvin Bush, the president's brother, was also a board member at Stratesec, although Stratesec maintained contracts for security upgrades which were set to expire on September 11, 2001. They were not the company officially charged with World Trade Center security. This role was assigned to a risk management firm called Kroll Associates. Kroll's chairman, Jerome Hauer, was a longtime personal friend of ex-FBI counterterrorism expert John O'Neill and was responsible for O'Neill's appointment as head of security for the World Trade Center just a few days prior to the 9/11 attacks. O'Neill was the world's leading expert on Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda and was a potential 9/11 whistleblower with hard evidence of White House complicity in the protection and shielding of the 9/11 hijackers from all means of federal investigation. Al-Qaeda hijacking suspects were flagged by the Able Danger terrorist tracking program, which was also shut down by the White House. Able Danger whistleblower Anthony Schaefer claims the U.S. government destroyed over 6 terabytes of data related to Able Danger, which he also claims identified 9/11 ringleader Mohammed Atta as early as February of 2000. Those atop the chain of command in the White House, military, and intelligence establishment deliberately ignored all the warning signs of an impending attack. A clever strategy of plausible deniability which also served to portray those in charge as incompetent rather than complicit. In every major head throughout the chain of command on 9/11, from NORAD to the military, we see a repeated theme of complicity through negligence or incompetence. After 9/11, failure and incompetence was rewarded and whistleblowers were silenced. Combined with the fact that 6 corporations control 90% of the media and CIA operations like Mockingbird admit to taking over and subverting our U.S. media, we can understand how such a big lie could have been kept from the American public for so long. But if you stop and take the time to do your research...
Could we hit a pause right here? I think it's important to preface this particular snippet of this clip with stating there's an idea that 9/11 and its plans had been in place for a very, very long time. And I say that with the idea that these Saudis and certain individuals were either ignorant or negligent as presenting data and information to steer the narrative away from Mossad, to say that it was somehow a different sort of conspiracy rather than what truly conspired, similar to what we see with this Charlie Kirk assassination. What they do is they like to create layers upon layers of data and information that people must go through, which does have relevance and value and does substantiate certain narratives, but the purpose of which being is to steer away the conversation from the true motives and people involved in the said act, which I believe to be is Israel.
And one of Osama bin Laden's motives, main motive, was what was happening with Sunshine was talking about the Wingdings conspiracy. I don't know if you've ever seen that. If you know Wingdings, you know the text font Wingdings?
No, I'm not familiar.
You know how you can change in Word like your different fonts and stuff, and it'll make it look like different things. And there's one that's called Wingdings, and when you type in a letter, instead of a letter, it does an image. And when you typed in 9/11, I believe it showed 2 buildings and an airplane.
Oh, that's fun.
But as I was saying,
when did that come into being? What year was that?
Oh, I'm sure that was around from the 90s. Osama bin Laden's motives that we never really got told, as I was showing when I did the 9/11 stream by myself with the interviews that they did of Osama. They never really told you, much like they didn't with Hitler, what the what his actual motivation was. They wouldn't tell you, like Hitler's speeches, why he was doing what he was doing. And then the excuse was, well, they hated us for our freedom. And I'm wondering if he was just a fall guy that they could blame because they didn't want to talk about his motivations because it was something we were supporting, and they could get rid of him because he was a major funder of the anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist movement. Because he was
I don't believe that Osama bin Laden died. I don't believe that what transpired with SEAL Team 6 was a hit on Osama bin Laden. We allegedly threw his body overboard to dispose of him, to not give him a dignified funeral or cremate him or anything of that nature. And in my opinion, the idea is he was an agent working on behalf of the CIA and or Mossad, and his entire family was propped up, allowed to become quite influential and lucrative in business ventures in Afghanistan, on the premise that one day they would provide an individual from their family who would be blamed for this particular incident, and he would go on to be whisked away, similar to a Jeffrey Epstein or someone else of these particular clandestine involvements that would be never heard from again. You know, he gets a little plastic surgery, he cuts his hair, and he lives in Argentina, you know, till he's, you know, not necessarily Argentina, but you get the idea. Yeah,
Well,
it's really not complicated when you consider he was one of the individuals who came out of the Mujahideen and what transpired between Russia and Afghanistan in the wars of the 80s. And then he just somehow decides to attack America. Why not attack Russia? Why not attack Moscow? What sense does it make that this Mujahideen terrorist, quote unquote, would decide to create an organization that would go after these two buildings in New York, when what inflicted damage, terror, and problems in his particular country was perpetrated by the Russians? And when we supported Afghanistan and the Mujahideen, we trained them, we funded them, we created what would become Al-Qaeda. So the idea that he, in some way, shape, or form, would be responsible for this in any capacity is beyond reason.
so I would say that I think it's perfectly plausible that he was alive, and or made it out of there and never got killed. But I do think just because the letters that came out and the motivations of his own words of why the attack happened makes me think that he was no longer
Are those
our
videos
asset.
real?
I don't know, but there was still the letters, because they wouldn't be they wouldn't hide that if he was talking
sure.
about the
Why not?
Palestinians. They wouldn't
Why
want to
not?
draw attention to that.
Why not write something up that paints a narrative? Because again, this is a long-standing plan. This plan has been in the works for years. Could you do me a favor and pull up that cartoon that I shared with you that was put forth by Peace Dozer? I know it.
I don't
Is it?
have it downloaded. I didn't download that one.
Oh, shucks. That was one of the good ones. Well, just to explain to anyone who's listening, I wish my good friend downloaded that one clip, but it's the Cookie Monster in 1974.
1976, Sesame Street, Monsters on the Loose. He's eating
The World Trade Center.
Yeah. Then there's Supertramp album cover 1979. Oh, I see. Where it looks like it says 9/11 behind the.
There's a few more. You can go on, but it's very powerful in forms of imagery. So I beg your pardon, gentlemen, we didn't have that available.
Yeah, just a couple of like comics or TV like media references.
1994, Iron Man shows a plane crashing into the Pentagon.
Yeah. New York, The Simpsons, where it shows Bart with a magazine that says New York and it says 9/11.
There's a Spider-Man showing the top of kind of World Trade Center 1 or 2 being decimated by something or other, and it clearly states that this is something that goes back at least 10 years, maybe 20, 30 even, since the inception of these buildings, that they were built to be brought down, that they are symbols of Joachim and Boaz, Freemasonic pillars, that they would bring down these two pillars and unite them as one for the purpose of instilling the New World Order. And the Patriot Act and what would come and follow could not come to pass without these buildings being brought down, the psychological trauma that was inflicted on the American people, and the acceptance of what would follow.
Well, the other thing too is, so like we in the 80s when we authorized the CIA to go and fund the Mujahideen, and then the spin-off turning into Al-Qaeda, kind of led by a lot of Osama bin Laden, then turning against us. The day of 9/11, one of the first world leaders that called us to offer assistance was Vladimir Putin, and called Bush to help us track down these terrorists, which is kind of interesting.
Vladimir Putin, whose grandfather was a cook for Lenin, a Jew whose mother is a Jew, Shalomovich. And of course, they would offer to help, being they were complicit in this plan for at least the last 60 some odd years, I would say, going back further, since the formation of communist Russia and the Bolshevik takeover and the murder of 60 million Christians. It's always been this boogeyman scenario where they set up these straw men and create a narrative where there's this evil empire that needs to be fought, and it's a threat to democracy. And it goes back to Operation Northwoods and Cuba. And should we go back further, it gets into the Cold War in Russia. And, you know, you can go back to the Civil War and what transpired there, and the catalysts that launched division amongst the nation, which would cause men to take up arms against one another when they were more or less all on the same page, and they presented it as this narrative of we're fighting against, people of different ideologies, when the only people who gained a benefit were the banksters, the men in power who sought to eliminate opposition and consolidate the power structure.
To find all the evidence is there, hidden beneath a mountain of disinfo and lies. From my experience, I've learned it's best to just ignore the bullshit. And despite the crazies we attract, the 9/11 Truth Movement has in its ranks some of the most brilliant and amazing human beings this planet has ever seen. We are so far beyond the bullshit at this point, people. It's time to start naming names and demanding investigations into these individuals and their businesses. We know they didn't hire a bunch of rookies to pull off the 9/11 inside job. And we know 9/11 was a cover-up in itself of a shitload of other schemes and covert activities that many of the same players were likely involved with. There is serious dirt here, so keep digging.
And it's kind of interesting that, like, at every aspect, like, one of the things that they always bring up when people question the plausibility of conspiracy theories is that, all these people would have to go and keep a secret. Well, each one of these people, like, kind of has their own mafia inside these groups. So, like, how, like, the example of, like, the Italian mob handled the garbage trucks, and then, like, another group handled a different racket, and like, one guy handled the insurance, one guy handled the opium facilitation, another guy handled, the security that would come along later. Each guy got set up to go and, like, to fund this and launder money through it. So
there are levels to the benefits of the recipients. Everyone involved in one shape or form was either involved in fraud and did not want to go to jail, or there were people who were seeking to make vast amounts of monetary gains as a result of what transpired, or there are people at the absolute top who sought consolidation of power, and money is the least of their concerns. They print the money, as we discussed in the history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind in episode 2 or 3. And at a certain level, at a certain point, it's no longer about being a peon who walks in line as a pawn and does the bidding of these individuals because you're complicit to a degree, and you will go to jail for the rest of your life should they choose to turn on you. It's that money doesn't matter, and it's consolidation of power and restructuring the world like a game of Risk. And money is the least of their concerns. They print money infinitely.
Well, they have to be able to get it into the actual circulation.
Sure. But in truth, they could create a scenario where, we got to print some more money. That's not necessarily a problem. The money is used for bribery and to allow people to keep their mouth shut because they're blackmailed. And it's similar to the Epstein situation, where they use child sex trafficking and people's vices. Some people are motivated by coin, others are motivated by sex, others are motivated by drugs, and sadly, many men are weak, and most have our vices, as you've stated on a few occasions. You're a bit of
A what?
a sex addict, and you like your
Pussy?
yeah, dude. There's nothing wrong with that. You know,
Gross.
I'm not condemning you for
Gross.
for being a man who who enjoys a little gross tang. But what I can say is you're not taking bribes and steering this narrative into a direction where
Well, I've ruined that for
um
myself by saying
well,
saying it
you're
out
not
loud.
you're not controlling this conversation or what we present on this channel, and you've allowed me to say anything I damn well please. You know, I don't think you're a Fed who's on the take. The thought crossed my mind once.
No, I do it for free. I'm actually
Exactly. You're in the hole just like I am.
no. I
What
meant I the feds don't pay me.
oh, you just yeah, you do it for the love of the thrill of being involved in espionage. I get you.
I stay
Okay.
up 24 hours
Since
to
4 in the
go and
morning
to do
in
this
about
with you.
yeah, in about an hour you're going to be up for 24 hours straight just to humor me. No,
Yeah,
you
as you guys don't know, yesterday I decided to stay up and stream for 5.5 hours and thinking I was going to get some good sleep and then have a nice day with my daughter. And then I woke up at 9:30 to find out that I have a leak in my foundation plumbing. So I spent the entire day hunting that down and fixing that. Thank God I didn't have to rip up a shit ton of concrete, but I'm running on very little sleep today.
he's a trooper. I appreciate you, Dylan. And honestly, you're the one who encouraged me to do this. You know, I used to call into low value mail consistently every week on a weekly basis discussing one Jew problem or the next, and it was you who said, hey, would you be interested in doing this on a long and more of a long form manner? And I had always entertained the idea. I had a friend who I wanted to do it with, and he was concerned about money and didn't like the idea of a name that I had for the podcast because it could push away sponsors, and I called him a Jew for it. And you know, we've come to become friends as time has progressed. We even had a little bit of a spat here and there where, you know, maybe there was some miscommunication, but long story short, yeah, you're a gentleman. We do this because we love it, and it's we don't get paid for this. We do it because it's important to get this information out for it to be received for everyone, even the despots and the weird and the people who are intrigued and are just seeking genuine information to enlighten themselves. It's about illumination, minus the Illuminati. And
Well, the other
you know,
thing too is like, so I find this stuff like interesting, and clearly we don't always agree on the motivations or what happens, but like I use this as at least like it's like a tennis match, or kind of like being able to like bounce ideas back and forth to test my knowledge, because like for me, and we both have the same motivation, is to wake people up to even if we have like completely like different beliefs on certain things, like our both of us had the same goal of waking people up to the dangers of the powers that be. And that's like really why I do this, is because I want to make sure that like this happens less and less, especially as I've had kids. It's becomes way more important to me.
You're looking at it from the perspective of perpetuating your family. I, at the moment, am single and have no one to worry about but myself. I don't even have good communications with my family as a result of the person that I am, and the approach that I've taken to presenting this information. I've been ridiculed, and as Mark from Low Value Mail, his podcast is called "My Family Thinks I'm Crazy." I've been that man for the last 20 years, and I'm comfortable with it. My coworkers initially used to say funny things and then make some jokes, and now they're very much on my side. And I presented an idea with the coworker the other day that the Holocaust wasn't real, and I presented this excerpt from individual who's a pardon the non sequitur, an expert on gas chambers and is contracted with the U.S. prison system, and he presented that there were no gas chambers, and he took samples from the walls and visited 5 of the camps, and he filmed all his works and sent them to independent laboratories for corroboration of his findings and the data that he had come to know. And I shared it with the man at church today, and he looked at me like I'm a crazy person, but I don't care. I'm comfortable with what I'm doing. And I'm okay disagreeing with anyone. I just want to be able to have these conversations because we live in America, and I do believe in the idea that America can be amazing, although it was created by Freemasons who were probably cognizant that they were working on behalf of Lucifer. There is some things in the Constitution that do present the opportunity for a healthy, free nation. And it's being taken away from us little by little by these satanic Jews. And I'm just happy that people tune in and are happy to participate in the work that we're doing. And I don't know where this goes, and I don't care, other than the occasional person tunes in and comes to an understanding of what we're up against. And I look at things from a biblical perspective, and I have my own biases. So if you don't care for those sort of things, I get it. But
it's funny that when we were having dinner tonight, my wife said this a few times before, is that she said, I don't even know how, if we were to split up at some point, how she would even, she doesn't even want to go through the ordeal of trying to get somebody on this plane of knowledge.
The same place. After living with you and coming to a certain degree of understanding, bro, I'm trying to find a wife. Fucking wish me luck, man. I'm so far ahead of these dumb women that I'm hard pressed to ever find a woman that's 30 years old, being I turn 40 soon, within the next week or so, that I'll be able to get to that place, and she won't vaccinate my children, so I'm looking at a girl in her younger 20s, just to prevent years of brainwashing and an idea that she's been corrupted for some odd years. So
well, yeah, man, just know that at least if you do manage to snag a girl that is innocent and not corrupted by the world and is in her younger 20s, just be prepared for every disgusting spinster female and soy cuck to call you a pedophile for engaging in a relationship with an adult woman. Just know that there's a lot of fun to be had there, and how
I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with that.
It's just the ride never ends. Tom says also about the jet fuel. Steel beams, if it's not hot enough to melt it, it will soften them and make them expand, compromising the perpendicularity of the structure and making it very, very weak. So
would they tip over?
So one,
I'm gonna grab a beer.
It would heat up. It would heat up unevenly. So that would have caused the tower to collapse at an angle if it did heat it up, and it wouldn't make it collapse like a planned demolition. The other thing is, too, like we had talked about, the quick explosion of the fuel wouldn't bring the temperature up at an even displacement and make it compromised like completely. That's what the experiments showed, is that even when they're heated up, they're still secure enough. They just kind of bend a little bit, like disfigure, but don't lose their integrity. But it would have to be so hot to it would have to be reaching like multiple thousands of degrees, which it did end up reaching. But that's the point, is that the fuel does not continuously burn to get to thousands of degrees. I believe it burned at 700 degrees, if I remember correctly. But I mean, I appreciate you investigating that angle. It's just that even what's odd is that they went and sold the steel. So if the steel was so compromised, then why did they go and remove it and then sell it immediately within I believe it was 3 months, or they had all of the steel picked up in 2 weeks, and then they had sold it within 3 months and moved it immediately to China to be reused.
China.
There's
can we show him the BB-18 clip after we finish this?
What's the BB-18 clip?
The Israeli art students.
Do I have that?
Yeah, I sent you 2 of them.
Okay, I'll have to look.
I sent them through X.
Okay, I'll look at that. This is, by the way, about the FBI and the 1993 bombing that was an actual bomb and did take out a couple of floors at the beginning, or the basement of the building. And the FBI could have prevented it, just like they did, or they could have with 9/11 and many other attacks.
On February 26, 1993, at 12:19 p.m., a truck bomb detonated in the underground parking garage of Tower 1 of the World Trade Center complex. The bomb was a urea nitrate device enhanced with hydrogen gas. The bomb ripped a 30-meter wide hole through 4 sublevels of concrete. 6 people were killed and 1,042 injured as smoke poured into the towers. Investigators found the axle of the Ryder truck that was used in the bombing, and were able to trace the vehicle identification number to the man who rented the truck, Mohammed Salame. Eventually, blame for the bombing came to rest with Ramzi Youssef, whose uncle, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, or KSM, confessed to masterminding the 9/11 attacks from A to Z in a highly dubious, heavily redacted confession extracted after 4 years of torture in a secret CIA prison, and after having his sons abducted and used as bargaining chips in the interrogation process. Media fascination with the case was quick to focus on Ramzi Youssef. But during the investigation, some startling information came to light.
Last winter, the FBI was praised for its speed in cracking the case of the World Trade Center bombing and bringing 4 suspects to trial. Now, there is some evidence that the FBI may have known of the plot in advance through an informant and might even have stopped the bombing that killed 6 people. Correspondent Jacqueline Adams has the story.
FBI agents might have been able to prevent last February's deadly explosion at New York's World Trade Center. They discussed secretly substituting harmless powder for the explosives, but they didn't, according to the FBI's own informant, Emad Salem. Unbeknownst to the FBI at the time, Salem recorded many of his conversations with his handlers.
I'm holding 903 pages of draft transcripts.
William Kunstler represents Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman and several others charged with conspiring to blow up a series of New York City landmarks 4 months after the World Trade Center bombing. That case has not yet gone to trial. Kunstler confirmed newspaper reports of the Salem transcripts. In one, Salem complains to an FBI agent, "Since the bomb went off, I feel terrible. I feel bad. I feel here is people who don't listen." The agent replies, "Hey, I mean, it wasn't like you didn't try and I didn't try. You can't force people to do the right thing."
There is material in here to show gross governmental misconduct.
Today, attorneys for the defendants in the ongoing World Trade Center bombing case formally asked for the transcripts of Salem's tapes.
Quite frankly, beyond me, why now, the 4th week into the trial...
I can still see you, Jared, and hear you. If you're having issues, I think Jared's having problems.
We still don't have these materials.
Prosecutors have refused to comment publicly, but legal experts say the defense may have no right to those transcripts.
It's not a defense to a crime to say, if only the government had stopped me, I wouldn't have done it. So this isn't material that ordinarily the defense would be entitled to.
In court today, a witness from the Ford Motor Company linked debris recovered from the explosion site to a Ford van where defendant Mohammed Salamat was arrested less than a week after the bombing. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, New York.
As reported by CBS News, the New York Times, and other respected news organizations at the time, Emad Salem was an ex-Egyptian army officer turned FBI informant, and was essential in helping convict others in the bombing. However,
So that, I believe, he's the one that was in San Diego, and Tucker just did like he's doing a 9/11 special as well, and his second episode discusses the 2 terrorists that we let into the country through California that stayed with this FBI informant.
was Salem's contention that he had agreed to supply fake explosives to the bombers, and he was overruled by his FBI handlers. Salem, perhaps experienced in the machinations of black ops, had the sense to tape some of his telephone conversations with his FBI handlers, including FBI Special Agent John Antichev. This is a recording of one of Salem's conversations with Antichev.
Everything was submitted with a receipt, and now it's questionable.
It's not questionable. It's like a little out of ordinary.
Okay.
You know.
All right. I don't think it was. If that's what you think, guys, fine. But I don't think that, because we was start already building the bomb, which is went off in the World Trade Center. It was built by supervision from the Bureau and the DA, and we was all informed about it, and we know that the bomb start to be built. By who? By your confidential informant. What a wonderful, great case. Wow. And then he put his head in the sand and said, oh, no, that's not true. He is son of a bitch. Okay, it's built with a different way in another place, and that's it.
In the taped conversation, Salem makes it clear that the FBI informant had in fact gone ahead and built the bomb. Antichev says nothing in response. Hundreds of hours of taped conversations exist between Salem and his FBI handlers, but they were never used in the trials of the bombing conspirators. To this day, the FBI refuses to acknowledge their foreknowledge of the attacks or the fact that their informant built the bomb.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mixed up. I think the 2 they had also an informant in the 1993 bombing as well. Tom says, I don't want the whole deal to be bogged down to a debate about H-beams. All that said, some POS did it, and I can totally believe that they were not brown and spoke English. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, I guess, the reason that people focus so much on the steel beams is the manner of the collapsing of the buildings, and it leading more to a why it's important is that it leads to an idea that this was all pre-planned, and then that leads you down to a rabbit hole of you know, how long did they know about this, how many people were involved, and it really just, that's why so much depends on this idea about the H-beams, because without that argument, they can still keep saying that it was just a plane that took it down, and they can blame, you know, terrorists, and nobody has to point the finger at the internal conspiracy to cause this. There's another thing I'll play also of Donald Trump, which is pretty interesting.
We had a chance after September 11th to be the most popular, for the first time ever, to be the most popular nation on earth, and we blew it. Everything's a lie. It's all a big lie.
Comparing Donald Trump to a truther, and those people are psychotic lunatics that blame the United States for 9/11.
A lot of people ask, how is it possible that...
It's crazy, too, that, like, you just witness it, all these people, like, what they're like in their early days, and then what they're like in their later days. Whereas, like, Biden was leading the charge about investigating into 9/11, and then later on is involved in his own major debacle with Ukraine in multiple aspects, the COVID thing. And then Trump here, you know, he wasn't invited, I guess, into these dealings. And so he had no reason, just like he also, when he was running for president, he said that Hillary Clinton created ISIS, and she never sued him for saying that because it was true.
A Boeing plane would be able to destroy or two planes would be able to destroy the Twin Towers, because they were constructed to withstand like a 707 attack.
Well, it's tremendous power and tremendous heat, and people were willing to die, and when they're willing to die and when they're willing to become kamikazes of a sense, there's very little you can do about it. I mean, the heat and the power, actually it was amazing that the initial jolts didn't jar the building as much as people would have thought. But the tremendous amounts of fuel that was dumped on the building and 1,600 degrees temperature, I guess that's probably more than anything could take, no matter what.
There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747, or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through this steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall.
I mean, the heat and the power, actually it was amazing that the initial jolts didn't jar the building as much as people would have thought. but the tremendous amounts of fuel that was dumped on the building and 1,600 degrees temperature, I guess that's probably more than anything could take, no matter what.
I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid, and you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
Very profound statement and very true.
Well, Alan, we've always had, as you know, very, very strong security, but there's very little you can do about planes crashing into a building. I mean, you look at Larry Silverstein, who's a terrific owner in New York and a very good friend of mine who I just called. I was very worried about him because I assumed maybe he was in the building. He took possession of the building 1 week ago. As you know, he just bought the World Trade Center.
Right.
And he was in his office, and he was getting ready to move into the World Trade Center over the next 2 weeks. So when I just spoke to him, there's nothing you can do when people are going to be bombing planes at your building.
The Twin Towers have their own zip code. There are so many people who work there, and there are so many offices there.
They recently sold, in fact, by the Port Authority of New York to an investment group, Mark.
I see what's happening down there. It's a mess. And the developer is actually a friend of mine, but he didn't want to build this building either. If you look back at the records, I mean, when it was first foisted upon him, Larry Silverstein is a great guy. He's a good guy. He's a friend of mine, but he didn't want to build this pile of junk. And it's a shame. It's really a shame. The developer is actually a friend of mine. Larry Silverstein is a great guy. He's a good guy. He's a friend of mine.
The developer is actually a friend of mine. Larry Silverstein is a great guy. He's a good guy. A friend of mine.
It's a shame. It's really a shame.
Donald, you're probably the best known builder, particularly of great buildings in the city. There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that.
At some point, we're going to put all this behind us, and you as a visionary, particularly in New York real estate, what do you think that we ought to do as a city, as a people, when all of this when the mourning stops, when the dead are honored, and we've found out what caused it and maybe corrected it? What does the city need to do?
Well, I guess the big thing that you really will have to do is never forget. You just can't forget that something like this happened.
Donald Trump, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you
we
all.
really
Good luck.
appreciate it. Thank you. Same to you.
You too.
It's all a big lie.
It's just such a wild like change, and these people will just completely change their story, like a 180. Like we're seeing it right now in like real time with all this stuff with Charlie Kirk. You see Nick Fuentes going from blaming Israel and Jews to everything to being like pro multicultural, pro Gavin Newsom, pro the Democratic Party, stopping people from questioning whether it was Israel, calling it low IQ anti-Semitism. Like it's absolutely crazy. What did I not play yet? I already played that one. Did play this one. Let's play this one right here, the coverage of the 1993 bombing.
Sitting in for Tom is Jane Pauley.
Good evening. You're looking live.
By the way, Jared's having issues with his microphone and camera.
At the world's second tallest buildings in the heart of New York City's financial district. At this hour, more than 500 rescue workers are there on the scene of a massive underground explosion that ripped through the World Trade Center just after noon today, killing 5, injuring at least 300. NBC's John Miller is there now with late information on the cause of today's explosion. John?
Well, Jane, the United States Department of Justice is operating on the assumption tonight, on the theory that this was the work of terrorist bombers because of the debris and rubble that have collapsed from 2 floors into a sub-basement garage where they believe the blast originated. They have not been able to get bomb squad people down there to find the point of origin. Incidentally, this is the same garage that the United States Secret Service uses to store President Bill Clinton's limousine, the one he uses when he travels to the New York metropolitan area. In the meantime, bomb experts here from the FBI's Joint Terrorist Task Force, New York City Police Department Bomb Squad, and the Treasury are assuming because of the force of this blast, the incredible force, that it could only have been done using some kind of vehicle that could carry hundreds of pounds of explosives, a kind of car bomb, as we've seen in cases in Lebanon. Right now, though, they say because of that rubble, they can't get down there, and it will be not days, but possibly weeks before they can dig their way in and find the point of origin. So they are operating on the assumption that it was a bombing. And of course, there was a call taking credit for this from a group calling it the Serbian Liberation Front, but they cannot verify the veracity of that call because it came in more than an hour after the blast. Jane?
Well, thanks, John. Gary Matsumoto is also there. Gary, what's the scene at this hour? Gary Matsumoto? We don't have communications with Gary Matsumoto. I'm guessing we should try to find NBC's Mike Jensen, who has also been at the scene of today's explosion throughout this afternoon. Mike, are you there?
Jane, I'm here. I've been talking to survivors, people who thought that they would be trapped in the building, and the stories they tell are chilling. New Yorkers like to think they've seen everything, but this was beyond their imagination.
And then somebody screamed, "Get out!" Everyone grabbed their coats and ran.
From his Midtown studio, anchorman Chuck Scarborough talked to people trapped in the giant building, tried to calm them.
Will someone come and get us, please?
We're going to try to help you out, Deborah. But downtown, it was chaos.
And we just heard boom, and the whole building shook.
A pregnant woman was rescued by helicopter. What was the worst moment for you?
The worst moment for me was around the 40th floor because my knees just became like jelly. And if it wasn't for the support of my coworkers who kept saying, "You got to keep going," I probably would have just sat there. I said, "Can I rest?"
Did you ever think you might not make it?
Yes, I did.
Charles McAteer was on the 56th floor when the explosion hit.
We went in the 20th floor and we had to get down on our hands and knees and crawl till we got into one of the offices so we could breathe, okay? That time I panicked because it didn't look good at that time.
Outside, rescue workers helped those who had collapsed or were having trouble breathing. Annette Zitron said it was a terrifying experience.
We thought it was an earthquake. That's what we thought, because the building shook and glass started flying, and I just said to my husband, "Run, get out of here." And I knew when we came in where the door was, so we just ran outside, and then I couldn't find my husband, and I thought something happened to him. And then luckily we were reunited.
Carmen Lirio thought she'd never make it out of the building.
I thought I was going to die of the smoke. If I would have been there 2 more minutes with that smoke, I think I would have passed out. It was horrifying. I've never seen anything like it.
Some of the survivors were exposed to asbestos, so they were taken to a special room here at the World Trade Center where they were showered and their clothes were laundered. Jane?
Thanks, Mike. Now let's go to NBC's Gary Matsumoto for a recap of what happened today. Gary?
Jane, at this hour, helicopters are still swarming the World Trade Center. Firefighters are still inside searching for the injured. There are at least 38 people in a triage unit on the 48th floor. There are no plans at this hour to evacuate them. For the estimated 130,000 people who work and visit the World Trade Center every day, darkness fell about 12:15. The explosion blacked out the entire complex. The power is out. There are people still trapped inside in elevators. Thousands poured out of the building, gasping for air. Eyes glazed with shock, they spoke of the devastation within.
There was no help whatsoever. Trapped on 94 floors all the way up. Nobody came.
There was smoke, and then the lights went out, and I'd say about 70 floors we had no lights.
Stairwells became smokestacks. Clouds of soot billowed up the stairs to the very top of the 110-story office towers. Some evacuees say they couldn't see their hands outstretched in front of them as they groped their way down to the ground, choking on the smoke.
The walls just blew in, and everything went blank after that. Walls collapsed, furniture's down. It's a mess downstairs.
The explosion blasted a gaping hole through the ceiling of the second sub-basement in Tower Number 1. This is where firefighters say the injuries were most severe. A crowded stop for commuter trains that shuttle workers across the Hudson to New Jersey. The offices just above the area lie in ruin.
It was a heavy smoke condition. A couple of rooms were on fire, and just a tremendous amount of structural damage.
Many workers were plucked from the roof by helicopters swooping down through gusting currents of frigid wind. Determining the source of the blast could prove dangerous. Investigators say there are several floors of rubble flooded by broken water pipes and electrified by exposed wiring. In addition, New York officials fear a possible environmental hazard.
The transformers that are still standing are dry, so that would mean there would be no PCBs or other contaminants. That's a good sign. There is significant indications that there may be an asbestos problem.
As you can see behind me, the streets of the city's financial district are still choked with firefighting equipment. Rescue workers say the operation is expected to continue late into the night. Jane?
Thanks, Gary. Within hours of the explosion, 3 miles north in New York's Manhattan, the Empire State Building, the city's next tallest, was evacuated after a report of an explosive device there. Police called it a precautionary measure. Nothing was found. Today's World Trade Center explosion came awfully close to being every urban resident's nightmare, trapped in a towering high-rise with a single thought, is there a way out? Here's NBC's Stone Phillips.
High-rise buildings enveloped in smoke. Whatever the cause, the reaction is the same: survival.
It was scary. There was nothing. We had no emergency lighting, no nothing. We had nothing.
High-rise fires are the ultimate urban nightmare. They are terrifying and often deadly. 1980, the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, 85 people killed. 1986, San Juan, Puerto Rico, the DuPont Plaza Hotel, 96 killed. And Mexico City in May 1991, another office building, 17 people dead. High floors, sealed windows, thousands of people to evacuate.
It's so funny that, like, in this video, in their own reporting, they talk about all these other buildings that were on fire, and it's long before the World Trade Center's collapse.
And as we saw today, suffocating smoke. Fire safety engineer Bob Benazzi. Is it just inevitable that smoke is going to rise up through the building as far as it did in this case?
Yes, it is, because in a high-rise building, a stair shaft or any vertical shaft is going to act as a chimney.
If you had one piece of advice to give people caught in a high-rise fire or smoke situation, what would it be?
I guess it would be to sit still and wait to hear what you should do.
Hard advice to follow at moments like this, but today, lives depended on it. Stone Phillips, NBC News, New York.
When Nightly News continues, mammograms for women under 50. Do they really help detect breast cancer? And George Steinbrenner is back in baseball. Can the controversial owner make his Yankees winners again?
Let's clear the air. Despite what...
All right. Do I have anything else to play? I guess Jared's still having issues with his camera.
My audio is good, and I can hear you through my headphones. So for some reason, I don't know why my camera is all of a sudden not working. It did do some of that funny business that I was incurring earlier when we were getting set up. And I know I need a new cable, but I don't know why my video is no longer working. It doesn't make sense to me. Because that no way is related to any of the wires I have set up on the system. I don't have an external camera. I'm using the camera on my laptop.
That's weird.
Yeah, I think we got the 8200 fucking fucking with what we're doing right now.
I don't know if I played this one. This is the last clip I have, and then we'll probably kind of wrap it up because it's getting kind of late for me, and I kind of want to sleep.
No, let's put a bow on it.
Let me turn the volume up a little on that. This is about World Trade Center 7. Oh, this is, I think, just the collapse of it.
It's important information. Clear implosion and controlled demolition.
That's wild. That's so crazy to see that just completely like not even on fire.
Yeah, it's a house of cards where, as Larry Silverstein put it, pull it.
That's crazy. Actually, I did have one video left that I didn't play. This was this is eyewitness testimony. I guess he's nicknamed Harley Guy, Mark Walsh. He's a 9/11.
Drop a few fun facts before we get into this. Michael Cherkoff, his family helped found his mother from Israel helped found Mossad and had evidence destroyed from 9/11. He released all 200 Israelis arrested on 9/11, including the 6 Israeli dancers caught with explosives.
There was 200 Israelis arrested?
Over the course of like a short amount of time.
Okay.
I think in the first few days, 60 were arrested, but it ended up being 200 at one point. And he wrote into the Patriot Act immunity for Israel regarding 9/11.
Excellent.
And then we have the president of Italy, all democratic circles. It was the president of Italy, not the prime minister. I beg your pardon. All democratic circles in America and of Europe, especially those of the Italian center left, now know that the disastrous attack was planned and realized by the American CIA and Mossad with the help of the Zionist world to place blame on Arab countries and to persuade the Western powers to intervene in Iraq and Afghanistan. So this is an open comment made by the president of Italy at the time, Francisco Cossiga.
Italy was the base for Operation Gladio.
Gladio, correct. And maybe he happened to...
Which led to the Serbian, as they were saying that they were blaming the Serbians for the first 1993 bombing. They were blaming them. And
Gladio gets into Yugoslavia and that particular war. Gladio was James Angleton, who happened to be running cover for Israel, has a plaque in a park or on a particular square where he was given commemoration. There's reason to believe he was involved with hiring some of the individuals that were involved with the assassination of JFK. He was a deputy director, so like the number 2, and held the position of liaison for Israel prior to the creation of the official Israeli desk, and happened to be good friends with the cousin or brother of the person who was the head of their atomic development project at the Dimona facility in Israel, and helped smuggle plutonium out of New Jersey. and facilitate the creation of Israel's nuclear program, which is one of the reasons why JFK was assassinated. Not only denying Operation Northwoods and turning it down from the State Department, he wanted to dismantle the CIA, as well as prevent Israel from developing large weapon systems.
And in his journal, I believe, said something about essentially on the same lines of we fought the wrong enemy. I think he was what it was saying is
General Patton. Who?
No, I'm saying it was similar to that quote by Patton or Eisenhower. Who was it? Patton. Yeah, it was Patton.
Patton, who was assassinated by a large a lorry, essentially like a semi crashing into the side of his military vehicle.
But JFK, he said, I think he said something about after reading Hitler's journals, he was kind of sympathetic to him. I don't remember. I don't want to misquote it.
No, but you're right. He did understand at a certain point that the Germans weren't necessarily the bad guys in the war, and I agree that the German people were not. I'm still on the fence about Hitler because some of the things that he did, as we've discussed, pardoning Baron Rothschild and exchanging him back to his family for $20 million rather than hanging him in public square. But that's can be found in episode 7. And I recently purchased the book Hitler's War by David Irving. It's a 1,000-page, 3.5-pound book that I'll be digging into, and we'll revisit that.
Sunshine was talking about in chat also about Kennedy with the silver notes. I remember that he had proposed making a bill bringing us onto a silver standard, and
Nixon repealed that.
Yeah.
He was the one that abolished the silver standard.
No, he abolished the gold standard. Kennedy was trying to put us onto a silver note standard.
I believe it was Roosevelt who abolished the gold standard, and Nixon abolished the silver standard, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong, but I think that's how I remember it.
No, Nixon they did it twice, because Nixon, on top of that, set us up for the 80s with the OPEC nations and the petrodollar. But JFK wanted to do the silver notes thing, but he never actually got around to doing it. But
you're gonna make me look this up.
But I believe that he actually didn't, because I remember getting in this argument with somebody about JFK and the silver notes, that he wasn't actually going to do it. Because that was like another reason of like people saying that it was the people behind the Federal Reserve that were behind his assassination and all of that. What was I starting to talk
you're right.
about?
Pardon me, you're right. Nixon removes gold standard.
Yeah, because Nixon did two major fuck ups: the gold standard and then sending our industry to China. I know for a fact that that's what always pisses me off about people that defend Nixon.
Well, he was involved in the Franklin scandal, and a part
Nixon was
the foundations of what would become the Franklin scandal. It wasn't the initial Franklin scandal project, but it was blackmail using children and homosexuals, and there was a prostitution ring, and that's the files that they went in to remove during the Watergate scandal. It wasn't necessarily spying on behalf of the Democratic National Party. It was or to implicate the Democratic National Party. It was to remove these files that he had that implicated certain people that were involved in these homosexual blackmail rings.
I don't remember, but like, I don't like Roger Stone, especially I don't like his support of Richard Nixon, but he did have, I remember him kind of explaining like the true story behind Watergate. And I almost want to say it had something to do with Barry Goldwater. And it really wasn't as, it was like, it was kind of a setup. Like Nixon was a piece of shit, but like most of the time when like these people get fucked over for things, like they don't get fucked over for the correct reason. Like,
yeah, they throw him under the bus for something small and minuscule
or irrelevant. Yeah.
Yes, it's in no way aligned with what they're truly being thrown under the bus for. It's to oust them in some capacity because they're meant to be tarnished in reputation, and the purpose of which is to prevent them from being able to speak out afterwards because they would have no credibility.
All right, let me play this clip of this guy that was a witness to the crashes.
Tumbling down. We want to bring in Mark Walsh, who's a freelancer for Fox. You live just a few blocks away and witnessed.
Dude, I live on the 43rd floor of a building, which is 5 blocks from the World Trade Center itself. I witnessed the entire thing from beginning to end.
People talk about how it looked like a movie. I know when I came walking down here early this morning and saw both towers on fire and people on every street corner, it was like a movie. But you watched the planes hit the towers.
I was watching with my roommate. It was approximately several minutes after the first plane had hit. I saw this plane come out of nowhere and just ream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
Obviously, there were a lot of people inside the buildings at the time.
Dude, guys from the 7th precinct, the 1st precinct, the fire department right here, the 7th truck, those guys are all right there at ground zero when those things went down. And God bless, I know there's a lot of guys there that were around there, and hopefully they made it out.
What was happening around you and the streets around you as this was all going down?
Absolute pandemonium. From my viewpoint up 43 floors, I could see people running like ants, just absolutely scurrying for their lives. Billows of smoke coming through the streets, just walking down the street, just pushing everybody back. And then several minutes after, it looked like it had just snowed over the entire area.
Yeah, the debris, the soot was thick on the street. There's still a dusting of it out here, but
what's up?
It just looks like to me like there isn't necessarily a structural failure. It appears to me that those floors were turned to pumice, and they no longer had the ability to hold up the building as a result of a clear controlled demolition. It doesn't take much just from the naked eye to see that these buildings are turned to dust. All those floors are undergoing explosions, and they don't topple. When a building has a failure in its implosion, when engaging in bringing down a building, tips over, it falls over onto buildings next to it. But what we see here is those floors being turned to dust and spread out as if an explosion has occurred.
Yeah, I guess you could see what I was doing.
No, it's great. Yeah.
And like, I remember watching a documentary like on this particular angle right here, this little section right here is where they say like it just completely evaporates and just completely disappears all at once in that one little area. It was like 9 floors, I believe, that just completely disappeared. and then the top the top floors just sink down, and there should have been, so like when these top floors come down and these floors that disappeared, that were obliterated, causing the top floors to come down, the force of the top floors hitting the floors that are still there should have caused these top floors to completely evaporate or be hit with the same amount of force against them. But you can see that they just continue to go down with it.
It's like a slinky.
It disappears.
Yeah, there's no resistance.
Yeah.
And material is being ejected in all directions, similar to what you would see if there was explosions. And when they look at the remnants of what could be found, it's very much reminiscent of what you would find in a controlled demolition. Even controlled demolitions, there's more material left over. These buildings were destroyed with such an interior force that each floor that was brought down systematically turned to dust. It was structural concrete that should have stood the weight of the floors above being eviscerated and ejected to the side.
All right, let's play the end of this.
Running for their lives, screaming, get back, get back, get back. And I'll tell you, that's a wake-up call when you see cops running for their lives, and people too, women's pushing baby carriages, that sort of thing.
Well, you had the first tower first. That one, when that first went down, it just pushed everybody back, and it was a good 15 minutes before the second tower finally collapsed. Yeah. And it was just overwhelming, and by that point, it was just insane.
Well, I'm hearing a lot of similar stories from people who were inside the building. One gentleman we spoke to earlier today, John, was on the 77th floor and said it was a relatively orderly evacuation at that point after the first plane hit the first tower. Everyone going down the stairs, not a lot of panic. But when they got to the 6th floor, he says they felt a second shake. And then people started to really be concerned. Obviously, there were people in the building at the time of this, and some of those people, they haven't recovered them yet, and that's a big issue right now, is trying to get the rescue workers and the emergency crews to the building. There were police officers there and emergency crews there when this was all happening, and they were right at ground zero when it all went down. Can we talk to you? What's your role out here right now?
I'm just standing by right now. Can't say what role I'm playing right now.
Well, there's a lot of standing by. There's also concern that some of these other buildings might actually come down.
Love always got a mask on.
This building right here with the glass that you see, the nearest tall building, that has structural damage as well. We saw a lot of glass broken out, and a corner of the building appeared to be in distress, and there's concern that there might actually be another collapse of that building.
What would cause any of these people to just stand around and just keep looking at, like, you've got to be so fucking stupid. I would be in fucking Colorado by the time that the second one started even thinking about falling.
Like George Wynn,
yeah,
who happened to be in Colorado, documenting the event, who was present at the Charlie Kirk event. But long story short, I believe that everyone who speaks at these is a plant. They're feds, and their job is to steer the narrative, and that's what we saw in the day of the event, in the weeks after. There are narratives being planted, like the passport of the Saudi pilot, which happened to be ejected from the area, was not engulfed in the jet fuel explosion, but somehow this said jet fuel managed to burn up steel beams, but this passport survived. And I find it all to be quite ludicrous, and most of the narratives have turned out to be false. But what can be substantiated is that we had 6 dancing Israelis and BB-18 fuses and Israeli art students who happened to be placed on the same floors where the impacts took place, as well as having access to 4 floors below, not necessarily those art students, but people who were engaging in what was it, fire suppressant work, which in my opinion was planting more nanothermite, which would allow for the structural collapse of the building, the implosion.
Yeah. And I went over that a little bit when I watched that video without you about the explosives experts and how they came to the conclusion of the thermite and those little beads.
The beads, which can be found everywhere, these dropules, these droplets that can only be formed in the presence of not just thermite but nanothermite explosions, in the manner in which it was presented, it was sprayed on, which would cause an extreme oxygen reaction, which would cause this material to be explosive rather than creating a burning, melting heat. It had the potential for rapid degradation, which would cause the structural collapse of the material which they were attached to.
I believe what their quote was that it was a special type of thermite that could only be like very carefully created because it was individually, like each molecules, like the molecules were crafted in a way that they were how was it that he quoted?
Well, the space in between them, they were so small that they would ignite violently rather than in a slow chain reaction. Each individual molecule would combust simultaneously. Richard Gage of the architects and engineers for a reopening of the 9/11 investigation, which is what you covered in the video that you had put forth in the last video, in the last stream that you had made on the subject. Richard Gage is the head of this particular organization, and he goes into it in great detail. And I didn't cite any of his work in this particular video because you had kind of covered some of it in the last, but yes, there's plenty of evidence amongst architectural engineers, and as you stated, explosive experts that state that nanothermite was used in the process, which destroyed these steel beams.
Well, so I think what I was trying to get to, though, the point is that like the chemistry of it was that it was so purely refined, like you were saying, in like such a individualized like mixture. I'm trying to think like how to best way to describe it in chemistry.
It's like powder coating. Like you're spraying on, literally. You're not painting with liquid paint and wiping it on with brushes. like they powder coated these beams with dust. So to speak.
No, okay. So the way I was trying to describe it, it was like basically individualized molecules that were so stable. Well, they were able to be reactive and not clump together, so that they would be reacting with each other, that they would only be reacting to this ignition and explode and individually react with I'm trying to describe this the best, as far as like the stoichiometry.
It would create a chain reaction with multiple minute molecules, one after another, being ignited, which would cause the next to ignite.
Well, no, it wasn't a chain reaction. It would be each one exploding individually. That was the point that I was making, is that it wouldn't be a chain reaction. They weren't in like a lattice structure. They were more in like completely isolated. What would be the fake planted narratives that would undermine the legitimately probable conspiracy theories? What would be the fake planted narratives that would undermine the legitimately probable conspiracy theories? So obviously we talked about the planes, the jet fuel, and the items inside the buildings, that these are their explanations for that. As far as the residues that people were claiming were thermite, they were saying was a red heat protection, because in my video previously when I spoke about this, it was a sulfur oxide, and it had like a red residue, and they were claiming that was due to the heat, the retardant that they put on it.
And Richard Gage covers that is the nanothermite, which was applicated to the beams.
Like I was talking about how in cadmium, like when I was in art school, they have like cadmium red is like a popular color, and they use that in plastics so that it can withstand temperatures of like 4,000 degrees, so that they can use it to adhere to things without damaging the color. So I would say that would be what they would claim is the cause of that color. Trying to think of what else. As far as the explosions that people were hearing, so there was witnesses that said that there was just one explosion. Then they had people that also were saying that there was multiple explosions. As far as
firefighters who entered the lobby on their way out, that said that the building had the lobby floor looked like an explosion had gone off, and then when they were running from the building, they heard more explosions. So this idea that there were explosions, it's well documented. It's documented by firefighters. It's documented by passerbys.
What he was asking was what would be like the reasoning against all of this, like what?
Oh, against?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying, like the kind of the devil's advocate stuff.
Oh yeah, no, sure.
So,
good luck with that. There is not much against, because there's too much to suggest that they're this was the case. So, I mean, maybe you could say that these people were plants, like in the sense that I said that some of these people have presented ideas that are to present misinformation. But why would they say that there's explosions if they were misinformationists? So one of the things that happens early on in a trauma event is news does present misinformation and disinformation, but they also interview people who sometimes say the wrong thing.
Oh, so he was asking what the fake conspiracy theories were. Well, definitely, I mean, some of the nuttier ones are that it was a hologram, that the buildings were holograms,
and directed energy weapons. Those are some of the
or that
others.
it was a missile. There was people that said that, like, not the Pentagon one, but the missile into the towers was kind of like one that they were trying to make popular. Trying to think of what other ones that they were trying to say. Trying to think of some of the other, like, the crazier ones that they were saying was responsible for it.
Well, the craziest thing is the idea that a shitty pilot can steer a 767 directly into a building at that pitch and angle, and there's many pilots that have said that, yeah, like that's hard to do for the best of pilots, let alone a retard.
Well, that's the Pentagon. I think he's more talking about the towers.
Oh, okay. No, that includes the towers. Like the pitch and angle in which they were. I don't know if it was the first building or the second crash. Like it kind of comes in at like a parabolic, like swooping angle, and their pilots that have been like, that maneuver itself with a 747 at that altitude is extremely difficult to
No doubt that these the crazier theories, as you're asking, be planted. Definitely, like, I remember, like, 4chan, like, when you were early
shit.
When you used to be like early days, it wasn't so bad, and then it just got to be impossible to fucking have any conversation. Like, there were literally bots that they started making that would just, like, flood a thread just to make it disappear. People would do that. There was all sorts of kind of stuff, like tactics like that. There's plenty of people that I think also that will go and say things that are actually factually true and then ruin their reputation, either purposely or they'll have their reputation ruined. And so then that invalidates everything that they said that could have been true, or the previous things. So, like, Jesse Ventura, who was that wrestler and then became governor of Minnesota.
Yeah, familiar.
And he was like
WWF, like Donald Trump.
He was like big into like a lot of the conspiracies, and I believe he was big into 9/11. And then all of a sudden just like bent the knee completely for the vaccines and pushed that narrative really hard, called everyone an idiot. And it's like, when they do that, either purposely or something happened where he has to start bending the knee, it's like, it's very useful to have somebody that was that big and important in spreading that information. Yeah. Just like Fuentes right now, where he's basically ruining all of the reputation for anybody that has any complaints about, Israel or immigration.
Alex Jones. I mean, it's the same people over and over. There's no difference between any of them. And I'm sorry for interrupting you. I think they're all plants every single one of them. We know about Candace Owens, her husband's father, and their like shotgun wedding that, you know, their engagement after 3 weeks of knowing each other. She was basically bought like a $2 hooker or a slave on the auction block, and all of a sudden is steering the narrative of counterculture. It's these people are meant to press an idea, steer the narrative, and eventually, when they've outlived their worth, they burn them, and they make them take a preposterous stance on a subject of great concern, like COVID and Jesse Ventura, and they burn their bridge and they dip off to Baja, as Jesse Ventura has.
Sorry, someone in the chat, that's Queen Chinxi to you. Is that part of the white plane over the White House? Do you know what she's talking about? Sorry, I don't.
No, I'm not.
Remember.
I'm not familiar. No,
I know that there was supposed to be an attack onto the White House. I believe the plane that flew through Pennsylvania, that was the one that was supposed to be headed for the White House, if that's what you're talking about.
Shanksville.
But probably going to go and wrap things up soon, unless you have anything more to add. Oh, Jared just disconnected. All right, let me. You're back. Okay.
Just wanted to say, in every major false flag event, there is a narrative that is presented on both sides of the coin. There was the official, and then there was the conspiracy. And it's important to recognize that even the conspiracy, and the information that's presented can be steered and presented in a manner to misdirect people like ourselves who are looking for the truth. And it's important to keep your ear to the ground, be comfortable with re-examining all the information that you've gathered over the course of 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a year, 2 years, 10 years, and understand that sometimes it takes a decade for things to develop and to gain understanding on what exactly transpired, whether it's JFK, 9/11, or Charlie Kirk. And with that said, I have my ideas on what it is that transpired most recently with the Charlie Kirk quote unquote assassination. But like 9/11, initially there was a lot to say that it was this, that, and the other, and the United States was involved heavily, or as we know, Israel and Mossad. But in the age of AI and deep fakes and what's going to be presented in the days, years, and decades to come, we need to keep our head on a swivel, at times reserve judgment, rely on discretion, and just let's not allow ourselves to be pried and pulled in certain directions because certain information is presented by one party or the next. Like, to me, the idea that Charlie Kirk is dead is debatable, and maybe we may revisit that on our next episode. But I just want to say that it is fair to say that Israel and Mossad was involved in 9/11 with what's transpired in the last 24, 25 years. But with each event that transpires, it's important to use discernment and be patient and do your research and be diligent, be open-minded, and be willing to admit that you're wrong when information is presented, and don't be rigid in what it is you believe, unless it's Jesus Christ. And that's all I got to say.
All right. Well, that's a good note to end on. Appreciate you guys watching the stream. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and like the stream. Kind of helps get our numbers up and more people spreading information. Other than that, I'm glad you guys tuned in and watched this. Neither of us makes any money, obviously, from this, and we just kind of do it for the love of the game and just trying to spread information out there and improve dialogue over things that don't get a lot of light. So you guys have a good night, and we'll see you next time.